Hey, I'm Gary from Partscaster Concierge.
I'm Alex from Robot Grapes Industry, and we're at Indy String Theory. Because you're like, okay, this is this pickup, but this is like, oh, this is this pickup, but it goes to that amp specifically.
All right. Like this is a machine.
It's a hell of a machine. If we're
Yeah, this is a hell of a machine, yeah.
This is awesome. I love this.
I've been a bit of a Robot Graves fanboy for a little while, so that's kind of what it started from.
That's a fair way to open it. Yeah, it's just another guitar. It's just an octave lower.
Yeah, they are super low.
Yeah, it like bounces over there, and I was like, yeah, it's different. It's weird.
Can you guys talk about where your the story or the process of collaborating on these two specifically? Who approached who? What was needed spec-wise to kind of get the ball rolling?
I've been a bit of a Robot Graves fanboy for a little while, so that's kind of what it started from. The necks are really cool. The first couple I saw, I think, were with JML builds. I was in Jay's shop, and I was like, what the, you know. Picked it up. It's amazingly heavy and, you know, just cool looking. Got to play them, even more blown away. Just got some really cool like Nirvana vibes from like In Utero, Steve Albini's aluminum neck. Yeah. Throw the right effects on there and just hit the sweet spot. So kind of just grew from there. Robot Graves in particular, I've just been really drawn to the thin profile. I like really thin, like old Ibanez necks and stuff, just really fast. They feel good. Overall consistency, I've worked with some other builders too, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but like the nut cutting, the filing, never had an issue with the Robot Graves neck. I tell them what the string gauges are, they drop right in place. Never had to do any major dressing or anything like that. Like they literally come just ready to go. So you don't really want to put a file on any of this aluminum if you can help it. You want to keep it nice and polished, and it's always cool, and I don't have to do any extra work with this kind of stuff. So. But yeah, I basically just reached out to Alex and was like, hey, I got some ideas for some builds. And he started hooking me up from there.
Yeah, for collaborations, I mean, as a person who just makes parts, there's a lot of collaborations that happen. And then the people who come back a second time, I'm like, oh, I do remember like that conversation. So it comes around, and same thing where he was like, oh, I want to do this. And I was like, well, what if I just like give you another neck? And then if it moves, you know, just let me know. Like, but at this point, you've continued to appreciate the work that I'm doing, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. So it's like, if it makes sense that if you're investing in my company, I will invest in your company, and like just try to do more stuff together. So it's like, always try to do that when someone's coming around for their third build or their fourth build. I'm like, yeah, dude, just let me know, and I can do more stuff or whatever you need.
Yeah, I ordered 3 aluminum necks at the same time, and it's like, this is insane to me. They're not cheap, you know. Like it's not an inexpensive hobby or an addition to your guitar, and having that much equipment on the way, I was like, man, I'm in deep at this point. But the guitars, I wouldn't change a thing. They're amazing. They sound cool. I've still got a third one that I'm sitting to do a build with. I don't think I've told you officially, but it's going to be a build for Nick Sadler.
Oh, that's cool.
So we're going to get another THRD bridge put on that, and behind the bridge pickup, and it's going to be a really cool one. So.
Is the delay just on that? Or is it like doing...
I think your primary signal is coming out.
Yeah, it like bounces over there, and I was like, yeah, it's different, it's weird.
It's gonna sound really cool in stereo.
Yeah, is it, so it's stereo cables into that? Okay, I was like, it's in mono. That's easy for me to understand. I'm like, no, I'm an idiot.
So the pedal board's basically designed around the split pickup kind of configuration for both of these guitars. Starts off with the Old Blood split meld. There's a couple different places that are doing kind of breakout boxes, but it essentially takes that TRS and breaks the ring and the pin up to separate signals. And then from there, we basically just have parallel lines running. There's a stereo volume pedal, so you can just turn both of them on and off. It also has a little pan effect, which kind of plays into the looper on down the board. But overall volume, tuner, basic stuff. Drive is still something that I'm working out. Right now I've got 2 matching fuzz pedals, one for the bridge and one for the neck. They're both Degrade from Dirty Haggard. It's one of my favorites, really bass heavy, cool mids. Nick makes an excellent gate on his pedals too. So they've got that splattery fuzz, but you can also just chug and it'll instantly clean up too. The bridge also has the Nepenthes, which is like a rat style with a boost. That's from Electro Foods, just to give the bridge a little more boost if you need it. And then from there, actually it hits the EQ, the float, before it goes to the drive. But the EQ, the float is actually like a filter pedal, technically. But it runs 2 separate signals. You can filter both of them independently. It was doing some pretty wild stuff. There's a sync switch to where you can run both the filters simultaneously. It's almost kind of like a phaser effect. From there is a Juliana Walrus stereo chorus, and then we've got the Pyramids flanger from Earthquaker, and then it finishes off with a DL4 from line 6, which is used as multiple delays or the looper. The looper is cool. A lot of people use that. You get 2 phrases. You can kind of go back and forth. But with split pickups and the panning pedal, you can actually get double the phrasing out of it. So you can cut to just your neck and write, a chuggy riff, and then go to the bridge and put something higher over that, and then switch over to your other loop and do the same thing. So you wind up with 4 parts instead of 2. So just a way to get more out of a single loop. One person can make a lot of noise.
Yeah. Become 5 guitars real fast.
Exactly.
When someone picks up one of your split guitars, do they need to buy their own TRS splitter and TRS cable?
So both these guitars are actually packaged with a TRS 15-foot cable from Rattlesnake, and then we've got the breakout box from Old Blood, that split meld. So there's a kit actually packaged with both of these guitars ready to go. So you can plug it in mono and run it just like a normal guitar if you want to. If you want to do the stereo fun stuff, you are set up out of the box, ready to go.
It's interesting to see different approaches. I mean, obviously the guitar approach is a little bit more familiar to me of like understanding stereo split there, because that's a little bit more, most guitars are stereo split until the jack. This is just stereo split all the way through past the jack, which is, you're like, okay, this is this pickup, but this is like, oh, this is this pickup, but it goes to that amp specifically, and you're like, it's a whole thing. So that's awesome. And then I personally I think there's a lot more in the future of guitar to stereo split signals. It's one of those things that sonically, when it hits your ears, especially in a live setting, playing with your band, practicing or anything like that, between 2 different amps, there's a visceral thing that is just different about that. So I'm very used to that because I only play through stereo setups. But the way that you have this configured is so much neater than what I do a lot of ABY separations, and then I buy little mixers to mix down, and you have this way more efficient and way simpler than what I would do, because my board is twice as wide with like half as many functions. But I do the exact same thing that you're describing. I use the Ditto X4, and I do a lot of stereo looping, and it is as versatile as you're saying, because you'd be like, I want this EQ setting. Once you get very familiar with the board, you swap to a certain pickup, swap to a certain amp, turn on the loop, and then even on that same loop, so same phrase length, you swap to the other amp, you swap your EQ setting, you toss on a delay, and now you're adding the counter melody to it. And then maybe your bandmates will do something in there. They'll help write. But yeah, it's one of those things where you can really, in a bedroom, you can write a whole song accidentally.
Yeah.
And then once you are cozy live, it is way easier than it sounds like.
Sure.
For aesthetic purposes, can I try the really ignorant Mockingbird?
Yeah.
All right. This is a machine. Like, this is a machine.
It's a hell of a machine. If we're being
Yeah,
honest.
this is a hell of a machine. Yeah, this is.
Insane.
This is awesome. I love this.
Yeah, that thing is wild. What is that, Robot Graves neck?
Yeah, this feels great.
Concierge body. So yeah, can you walk us through kind of the process of aluminum building? Is it a casting process or?
It was, so there's actually like a wide swath of different approaches that people have taken over the years. Like the Kramers are the infamous one in the sense that like that's what most people have played as a Kramer. They were a little bit more widespread throughout the market, probably because they were cheaper and because they were cast. So the casting process, similar to casting anything else, it does have some give and take there. You get to use less material and it's way closer to the finished product right out the gate. You have to deal with shrinkage, and then you also could end up with like air pockets in there and other things. And you also end up with a built-in, hard to find if there is any stresses built into the material itself. So generally I think from like Travis Bean all the way through, everyone is now using pre-tempered billets. So the tempering process is, they're melting the aluminum down, getting their specific alloy and doing their thing. And then they're reheating the aluminum to make a more perfect crystalline structure.
More stable.
Yeah, so it ends up being like, there's like weird YouTube videos about this of like when you start bending metal, what's happening and in the atoms. But metal is in the end just a crystal. It's not like wood fibers or any like other materials. It's way closer to what you imagine, just a bunch of atoms perfectly lined up. And that tempering process basically lines them up nicely. And then same thing, like the billets I get are tempered, aged, and then from there I just start machining from a square block that comes from the factory of square blocks where they make them. And I start from that. So it's just, I turn 90% of that material into chips, which sounds wasteful, but it is infinitely recyclable, which is really nice about the material. So
you are saving and...
Yeah. I drive down to my local guy with a 45-pound bag of aluminum chips, and I get $5, and I buy a sandwich on that day, and I'm like, it's a great exchange. So yeah, it is nice. Same thing where it's like I like working. Wood is nice because it's a net sustainable product. That's the doubt. Like looking at aluminum, you have to try to think about your mindset of like how sustainable can something be. But it is nice that it's like, okay, it is infinitely recyclable, and if you wanted to, you could be like, we'll just melt the neck. And I when I make mistakes or I drive an end mill straight into a product, which I did the first base 6 neck prototype, I was like, time to make a base 6, and I just drove the end mill straight through it. I was like, okay, well, I'll bring it to the recycling guy and he'll chop it up into pieces. And
Nope, if I screw it up, I can only make something smaller.
Yeah.
Or firewood.
Yeah, it's very hard to stretch the wood out. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I can't, a lot of times it just has to go, but that's a sacrifice. It's very, very few times where I've been like, oh, I'm gonna run B stock or something like that. Every so often I'll be like, there's a little gouge here. I'll take, $50 off, and I'm like, but if you don't, just get a real one. Like it was too late. But yeah, my personal one, the 5th fret side dot is a little bit wider because there's a drill bit stuck inside of that one. And I was like, oh, I'll re-drill it. And then the other drill bit went, and I was like, that's mine. I screwed it up so far that it is just not worth it.
Give it some character.
So we're obviously very familiar with the full process of, hey, I gotta build the body, I gotta finish it, I gotta build the neck, I gotta do the electronics, what all do I need to spec out? Is there a little more freedom in collaborating where I can focus on making the best neck that I need to make, and then the rest of the process goes to the other person to worry about what body it's going on, electronics, that sort of thing? Because I know you've built some full builds yourself, correct?
Yeah. I mean, in general, that comes down to, I would say, more of like similar to the going back to like that 50s perspective of thinking about it in a universal or modular type of perspective. So a lot of the time when I'm designing the necks, really the only thing that I'm changing when I'm machining them is the inlays. Everything else is kind of like on a full build, it's set up so it could accept 3 pickups, even if it's a single pickup thing. The bolt holes are there because I just standardized that process, and it's similar to doing this the fender bolt-on. So a lot of times it's is it a Mustang bass? Is it a P bass? Is it a Jazzmaster? Or is it a bass 6? There's like this the scale lengths and the variables there, and then from there it's just like whatever ideas that can come up to make the build. I think it gets more towards that alignment of all the work you need to do when you want to have a cohesive build. So like similar to this having like I think both of these are a mirror finish, but like I offer different finishes, and on certain builds, it will really make the build feel like a unique instrument as opposed to parts that like there's a difference between going on eBay and buying a bunch of parts and putting it together. It will always look like that.
Yeah, feels like they're meant to go together.
Yeah, it's like if you have this mindset and you think about it, and like that's a credit to you of like picking the parts specifically to being like, okay, this bridge is chromed out, these are chromed out, I want the polished finish to match cohesively across this. And same thing of like, when you pick, is the pickup cover a chrome finish or is it a polished nickel finish? And it's like, well, one's a slightly bluer tone, and I'm like, that's where I'm like, okay, I'm definitely dumb, and I don't know enough about like, and like someone else will be like, oh, I want this exact thing and stuff like that. But you always trying to match that stuff as best as possible is about just as hard as someone else doing it. And I think that's why a lot of times when you see someone on stage play, or your friend has a Partscaster, you can tell pretty easily when it is, a pile of parts that was put together. And then when someone who's good about it and really like sits down and thinks about what they want out of it, they'll be like, my initial gut reaction is to buy this thing right now, but I should do the research and be like, oh, Lawler makes a different pickup cover. That would really, it might be $10 different, but if you didn't do the research, you don't even know they sell it no cover. You could get the, like the zebra ones where it's like the beige and be like, oh, I want the zebra pickup cover. That'll make it 80s as heck. And it's like, that's worth it if you do the research. And you're like, yeah, if you're doing the Explorer shape, that pickup is gonna match it, and it's not gonna look like a pile of parts. It's gonna look like some custom builder made that specifically for you. Just ends up that you're the custom builder in that respect. So
that's a lot of what I do. That's the whole Partscaster concierge part of my business. I've got all kinds of requests. People want to do. Every build is one-off. Everything is unique. So just case-by-case basis, finding those little details exactly that's going to match just that guitar and that style and aesthetic and everything just right.
Yeah, again, I mean, like the same thing of like, again, like pickguard here, match it. Like it's one of those things where it's like, it's just such a cohesive build that I'm like, yeah, this is just like a straight up company. Like it's just doing its thing. And the same thing with this one, the finish on this plus the switches makes it like, for some reason in my head, and I couldn't explain why those work together, but they are working together in the way that I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what that should be. Doesn't seem like, I built the neck and you built the body. It just seems like, oh, this is one whole design from the moment it came out of your brain. It was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it needs to be. And then it comes out exactly like that.
That's how some of the builds go sometimes. I've got some stuff that I sit and work on for months, just in bits and pieces at a time. And both of these were just like, they fell together.
Yeah,
like I knew exactly what I wanted, how to pull it off, kind of what we're working with for necks and parts and everything, and they just both came together really well.